Hello, everyone. Here is Tatiana Bazzichelli from the Disruption Network Lab, and I'm very glad to welcome all of you at our 36th conference, Technoviolence, Confronting Systematic Injustice. We are connecting from the Kunstquartier Bethanien, and I'm very happy to welcome both the people that are with us, our great speakers, our audience, and also the audience that is following us online. This conference, as I say, is called Technoviolence, Confronting Systematic Injustice. And we want to explore how we can expose and resist state and corporate violence. We will speak also about the context of war, border surveillance, and the targeting of vulnerable community. And we want to expose the role of technology in enabling this form of violence. At the same time, we also try to think all together how can we reverse it, and also how could we imagine technology as a tool for empowerment and also resistance. This is the second conference of the series of this year, and also the 36th conference that we do here, the Kunstquartier Bethanien. So I'm very glad also for the work that we are doing as Disruption Lab, that we are still resisting and surviving in this very difficult moment. But so today and tomorrow and also Sunday, what we will do is as well to explore moments of solidarity, because we think that is very important, especially in this time in which we are witnessing a lot of violence on the media, online, also in our cities, that we try to find these moments to come up together with solutions and at least a form of resistance, because the solution is very difficult at the moment. But I hope that with the 3 days of discussion that we will have, at least we will come home with a sense of unity among each other. So the first day, we will start with a great keynote of Ifeoma Ozoma, in which we will discuss how corporate secrecy mechanisms are silencing workers, and also how we can discuss about discrimination, harassment, and human rights abuses within technology companies. Then we will have a book launch by Whistleblowing, his book that is forthcoming in very few days, Platform Brutality. And we will go on with a very important panel in which we will discuss the situation from Germany to Mexico to North Africa in the Swana regions, speaking about algorithmic and technological control and how this is emerging at border, in militarized context, and in urban environments. The second day will be about the discourse of how big tech is weaponizing against vulnerable community. And we will transition from the discourse of the digital sphere and the AI war cloud to the situation in Central America, DC Congo, and Palestine and Gaza. And finally, we will end the conference with the keynotes of Terry Albury and Lindsay Billing about whistleblowing and reporting, and how this can make possible to denounce secrecy and surveillance, and how the most important also for us, grassroots resistance help to reach this scope, so to create a different kind of solidarity, and also to create a form of truth-telling that is needed, so we don't only think that whistleblowing are important, but we think also that together with whistleblowing there should be the support of the civic society, both for whistleblowers, but also for all of us. The third day, we will have a workshop with Rimas Geyer about online harassment and transnational hate campaign, and also how these hate campaigns are reinforcing system of fascism, patriarchy, and technoviolence, especially on social media. And this workshop will be not here, but at Stadtwerkstatt. At the moment, the workshop is sold out. There is a waiting list, but you are welcome also to register. And I want to thank our funders, the Hauptstadt Kulturfonds, that is the Capital Cultural Fund, the Riva and David Logan Foundation, and we are part of New Perspective for Action, a project by Reimagine Europe, co-funded by the European Union. I also want to thank our partner venues, corporation partner and media partner, and especially also a new funder that we will have from October, Luminate, that is supporting our Disruption Network Institutes. So I'm also very happy that finally we got great support for this specific project that works specifically on whistleblowing, AI and warfare, and also the way this technology are harming marginalized communities. And a big thank also for our audience that is following. I want to remind to the people online that you can chat with our speakers. We have an online chat that is going on, and Christine is moderating it. So you can propose her your question, and she will going to bring the question to the panelists during each session. So if you are following from YouTube, go on our website, because there you will find this chat. And specifically a big thank to our streaming partner, Boiling Head Media, that have been doing really a great work of streaming, live streaming during our many conferences. And from this conference, we also have something new. We have these hearing aids, like headsets, that are helping especially the people that have problem hearing, or the people that are sitting on the last rows, because I can tell you sometimes there is echo in this room. So if you have problem hearing, you can go at the cash desk and get these hearing aids. And I also suggest the people that have problem hearing to come closer, because it's better if you are close to the stage. And at the same time, I want to say a big thanks to our members. We have also a membership campaign going on, and you can always become our member. It's a great form of supporting us. If you pay €50, you can enter to all our events for free during the year. And even if you are not in Berlin, it's a great form of support, because it's a gesture also to make us feel we are doing something good. And now I'm very happy to start announcing our keynote that is called Breaking the Code of Silence, from Whistleblowing to Systemic Change in Tech, with Ifeoma Ozoma. And I'm very happy to welcome on stage Tammarrian Rogers, please. I'm going to introduce Tammarrian briefly, and then I will leave the stage to you. Very happy that you are here. Tammarrian Rogers worked in the tech industry in the United States for more than 30 years. She has worked at several companies, including General Motors, Apple, Microsoft, and Snap. Tammarrian has also served on community, non-profit, and for-profit steering committees and boards. In November 2021, she left her position as Snap's first inclusive engineering director to focus on the development of a robust product development methodology that builds trust among customers. And she advises socially conscious business and hosts multi-generational and multidisciplinary convenings to foster collective listening, learning, and action towards a trustworthy tech industry. And she currently lives in London. So now I leave it to you, Tammarrian. Welcome at the Disruption Lab, and welcome everyone.
Thank you, thank you. Very good. Sound? Okay. Hello, hello. I'm honored to be here, and I always, when I listen to my bio, I'm like, who are you talking about? But so, thank you. I'm really excited about the conversation that Ifeoma and I are going to have today. I anticipate that it's going to be very engaging and hopefully leaves a lot for you to be thinking about actions that we all can be taking. And I think it's going to be really important. I don't have any fear that there will be engagement from the audience when we get to the questions towards the end. So, keeping in line with the theme of this event, we are going to talk about non-disclosure agreements or employment agreements and how they are used as mechanisms to silence people from bringing up issues where they're experiencing discrimination or harassment. And if you think about a really good example where an employment agreement or employment agreements were a part of this movement that's sparked by the Me Too movement, employment agreements were a big part of that. And many of you may remember or have been a part of, unfortunately, witnessed a lot of this, and there was a huge outcry in the entertainment industry when Harvey Weinstein was faced with multiple allegations, and it took several people coming together to bring justice, to make sure that this was apparent and real, and people were understanding what was going on. But it's important to remember that these employment agreements are a part of many, many industries, including tech. And we don't see as much of this outcry in these industries. And so we'll have an opportunity to hear Ifeoma's story dealing with an employment agreement, but also facing discrimination where she had to make a decision about what to do. So one of the things that we will also cover is within the outcomes that have happened from Ifeoma's work, the Silence No More Act that's now law. We'll talk a little bit about that and where it is today. We'll also talk about the pragmatic approach that Ifeoma has when thinking about or countering systemic change. Prioritizing tangible actions over what many of us will call analysis paralysis, where we get stuck in a loop of wondering, why is this happening? What should we be doing? And not actually taking action. You're stuck in academic theorizing. So how do we move beyond that? And a lot of the initiatives that Ifeoma has taken on is really based on understanding power structures that enables a more effective path to change, and we'll talk a lot about that. We'll also examine individual courage and collective action and the role these strategies play leading to change. And finally, we'll touch on surveillance technologies, algorithmic discrimination, and platform policies that harm vulnerable communities globally, and specific calls to action for us to consider. So, as I mentioned, we'll have a chance for questions at the end, and I'm super honored to introduce Ifeoma Ozoma to you. Ifeoma is the Director of Technology Policy for the Kapor Center Advocacy. After experiencing discrimination at Pinterest, she resigned and founded Earthseed to advocate for worker protections. She co-sponsored California's Silence No More Act, signed into law in 2021, allowing workers to share information about harassment despite non-disclosure agreements. She co-founded the Transparency and Employment Agreements Coalition, leading to reforms at Apple, Google, Microsoft, and other major tech companies. And she previously held policy roles at Google, Facebook, Pinterest, and holds a BA from Yale University. Ifeoma is joining us from Santa Fe, New Mexico, where she left her hobby farm with goats, chickens, rabbits, fruit trees, berry bushes, 4 dogs, and The Legend of Zelda, her video game that she loves playing, to be with us tonight. So thank you so much for being here. Come on, let's talk. All right.
Thanks for exposing me for being a nerd. Thanks. Thanks.
Embrace this, embrace this. So just to get us warmed up here, I'd like to do a little bit of a participation poll from the audience. And sorry for those of you that are online, you won't be able to participate, but you can, I think, send in comments if you wish. But I'd like to ask, how many of you have signed an employment agreement in your life? Okay, so for those on the call, virtually every person, unless they haven't worked yet, is raising their hand. Okay, and for those of you with your hands up, that had your hands up, how many of you have read it thoroughly? Okay, that's good. There's still a majority of people have their hands up. And how many of you have disputed it? Okay, we're getting thinner. I got looking like about 10 people. And of those of you who disputed it, how many have had it amended successfully and favorably? Oh, we've got a good handful of people, about 7. Very nice. Okay, that's great. Well, that is more than I anticipated, so I'm really pleased to hear that. So, Ifeoma, let's go back to 2018. You've joined Pinterest policy team, and you've had some experience at Google and Facebook by now.
Yep.
First, did you sign an NDA? And then tell us what you're experiencing. It's 2018.
Yeah, my experience at Pinterest was so interesting because they recruited me. I was at Facebook at the time. I had a number of issues with the leadership at that point. And this was, if you can put yourselves back in 2018 Facebook, this was right after Cambridge Analytica. There had been the Nazis marching on Charlottesville. Internally, I had been reprimanded for asking Mark Zuckerberg at a company-wide Q&A about why he had said nothing, even internally, to employees about Nazis using the platform to organize and then march in a city in the United States. And so when I was recruited to Pinterest, I thought, oh, this company is great. I don't use the platform, but they appealed to moms, so how bad can it be? And I learned pretty quickly exactly what was going on there. And so, yeah, it was an experience. And I think for someone who I don't have rose-colored glasses, I've never met an issue I felt uncomfortable speaking up about. I was still pretty naive. I thought going through the process of talking to my manager, talking to HR, was an avenue I could get issues that I was raising about discrimination, namely pay discrimination, gender and race discrimination addressed, and that was not the case at all.
So was there a breaking point? Like there was a moment that you decided, this isn't working, I need to pivot.
Yeah, oh my goodness. One of the things that stood out, and that's been, that was reported on back when I first went public, was Pinterest, while I was there, was still promoting slave plantations as wedding venues. We're in Germany. You can imagine what the response would be if you had concentration camps or former concentration camps as wedding venues. The history is analogous, and that is still, to this day, happening, and it's being celebrated again. I think it's important to note the moment we're in right now, where, and we'll talk about this more later, I'm sure, but the decision I made to speak up back in 2020, it would be a lot more difficult now if I were facing the same set of issues. I don't know that I would make the same decision now because people are being disappeared daily in the United States, and the companies, including the ones that I work for, have aligned now with a government that is intent on silencing folks who speak up about real things and then people who make jokes, like Jimmy Kimmel. So anyway,
yeah.
Sorry for the downer, but yeah, that's the slave plantations being used as wedding venues, speaking up about that, being reprimanded in a performance review for asking about that was when I thought, huh, yeah, I need to find a lawyer and make some moves.
That decision happened primarily when you had hit your limit in terms of, hey, they're not respecting me in a lot of ways, and they're actually doing more harm to the communities because of these, they're continuing to promote these spaces that have detrimental history and saying this is okay.
Yeah.
So did you decide, what were the factors that you had to consider to decide, I'm going to call a lawyer, and was it at that point you said you were going to break the NDA, or was it after talking to your attorney?
So attorneys are famously reticent to provide advice to break agreements. So my lawyer is not different. He was very worried for me because he had represented clients that had been subject to retribution from companies and from individuals. The Harvey Weinstein example you gave is a great one. There's everything from a company coming after you for financial damages to just ruining your name to ensuring that you don't get a job again, that were potential consequences. But for me, really, the decision not only to hire the lawyer, but then getting pushed out after I hired the lawyer, being forced to leave, and then signing the agreement. Like many of these agreements are presented in a power imbalance. If you need a job, sure, you can dispute an employment agreement and then not work. In the United States, the question you're facing is not working, not having health insurance, which all of our employment is tied to, potentially not having a place to live because there is no real social safety net. And so these agreements are presented as choices, but they never are. And the companies that offer them both at the start of employment, mid-employment, when something happens at a company, people are often presented with the agreements. And then in my case, at the separation of employment, they're offered with a tie to funds, with a tie, so a paycheck, with a tie to health insurance continuation, which mine was tied to as well. And so there really is no choice.
Yeah, and it seems that that you really had to decide that you were going to do away with that you were in a position to say it's worth it. And was that for you or for the community or what?
It was both.
Okay.
And I mentioned earlier, if I were in the same position now, there are a number of reasons why I might have made a different decision. And one for me is I have a child now. I did not have a child in 2018 or 2020 when I spoke up and broke my agreement. I didn't have a dependent. And so for me, I knew that I would probably never be hired in the industry again. That it would be really difficult to figure out a paycheck, figure out health insurance. I wrote a piece at the time about how I was paying $1,000 a month for my health insurance. It would have been $2,500 a month if I had a kid, if I had another person, my husband, on my health plan. And so I literally could not have afforded to speak up if I were in a position like that. And it's something that I'm really mindful of, and part of why I spoke up, because I knew moms who faced the exact same thing that I faced, who were experiencing wage and race and sex discrimination and could not afford to speak up. Because if your choice is between your kid seeing a pediatrician and you talking about how your employer is breaking the law, keep quiet. It's no choice.
So what was the fuel? What kept you going through this process?
I'm stubborn. Yeah, I'm really stubborn, and I was very angry, and so that if I'm being totally honest, that was it. That like this is effed up, and I'm in a position where I can say something, so I'm going to. Yeah.
Did you find that there was a finish line?
For me, there's no finish line, but a really proud moment was the signing of the Silence No More Act. So you spoke about it earlier. California has 40 million people, and so getting a bill signed into law in the state is hard for a number of reasons. The tech industry really runs the state, and so having a bill that was explicitly about silencing mechanisms that the industry was using, signed, having it cover 40 million people. Employment is where we talk about it the most, but the bill also covered housing. So it ensures that both landlords and employers cannot use non-disclosure or non-disparagement agreements in housing. Like imagine your landlord presenting a contract, mid-lease even, and your option is you can pack up and get out or sign the agreement. The power imbalance is insane, and landlords and employers were using these contracts for years to keep people silent about things that they knew were illegal. And so for me, a personal finish line was getting that first hurdle in California, and then Washington and a number of other places considered similar bills and adopted the language too.
Was the Silence No More Act, was that something that was already going, or did you initiate it? Because I know you were co-sponsoring it.
Yeah.
How did you arrive at being a part of that?
So my background within the tech industry has been in public policy. So my education and my experience is in government relations, working directly with policymakers. And so I immediately thought, oh, this is a great opportunity to connect with lobbyists who had been trying to move a similar bill for a while and just needed a little bit of external pressure, and my story was the external pressure that helped to get things moving and ensure that lawmakers in California, many of whom are funded by the tech industry, were put in a tough spot where they had to decide, are we going to support industry on this or support millions of our constituents?
Got it. Yeah, it seems that going down this path with Pinterest, you had a goal, you were on a path, a career path, things happened, you had to pivot, you're probably doing something different in some ways than you were originally planning, and now there are all these different initiatives that have come up from the Silence No More co-sponsorship to the Tech Worker Handbook to founding Earthseed, to the Transparency and Employment Agreements Coalition. The Silence No More Act, now law, is it only contained in California? I heard that it's also now a part of Washington State.
Yep. So Washington State has it. Ireland at one point was considering a similar language. And so at the legal level, there are a number of jurisdictions that have adopted parts of it. In Washington, they adopted the entire law and made it retroactive, which was incredible. But beyond that, with the Transparency and Employment Agreements Coalition, part of our focus was you can go state by state, you can try to go federally, but at some point people are left out unless companies decide to change their use of these agreements. And so what we did was adopt the environmental movement's approach of forcing shareholders to force a company to change the way that they act. And that was something that I was really proud of. None of the companies that we ended up forcing to change their use of agreements was happy about it. But when your biggest shareholders are voting on a measure, are saying that this is something they would like to see, they were forced to. So Google begrudgingly changed their approach. Apple also very begrudgingly. They were not happy about changing their use of the agreements. But the approach and the pragmatic approach that I really think is important in this work was the pitch we made to shareholders. When you're a shareholder, regardless of what I think of capitalism and billionaires, whatever, the system that we have right now is there are a few companies that own large parts of these companies, the tech companies and the tech industry that run our lives. And if they take a position on something, the companies usually follow suit. And so we approached them and said, hey, at the end of the day, you may not care about racism, you may not care about sexism, but you should care about the fact that these companies are paying out millions of dollars in lawsuits and in secret settlements, and you're the last one to hear about it. You read about it in the New York Times, in the Wall Street Journal, in Forbes, after it's been already paid out, and guess who paid for it? You. You are the shareholder. You are the one investing in the company, and when they're paying out, they're protecting executives. They're not protecting you as a shareholder. And that was an argument that made sense to them. So I think you meet your audience where they are, and for that part of the work, it really wasn't about me making like a righteous argument about racism and sexism, which I know to be bad, but knew these folks don't really care about at the end of the day. It was about money.
And it's interesting because you think shareholders wouldn't necessarily be in alliance with what you're trying to do, but when you show the dollar figure, it really, made a change, made a difference. I'm curious, when you think about the shareholder approach, do you think that is the most effective strategy when you're trying to make a change with these large tech companies or otherwise?
It was effective at the time, and I think you have to shift with the times. We are living in hell in the US right now, excuse my language, and so I honestly think that even the conversations we had at that point, because of the intense fear of retribution from the federal government, would not work the same now. I mean, I mentioned Jimmy Kimmel. He's not an activist, not particularly outspoken about anything, and was just pulled off the air. Earlier, I was talking about how I would not have accepted coming to this conference if I wasn't a citizen. There's no way I would come and speak about this topic, have my name on this poster online, and then go through an immigration line back in the US with a visa.
Well, you and I both have a bit of anxiety re-entering these days, so it's the real thing. Yeah. I share that. Yeah. So just coming back to the Pinterest journey and what all has manifested, you have this Tech Worker Handbook. What is it? Who's the audience for this book, this handbook?
Yeah, it's a project that I worked on with a number of other organizations, and I'm really proud of. The idea was providing advice, providing resources to anyone who works within the tech industry. So whether you're an engineer or worked on the public policy side, or were a janitor working for a tech company, or a bus driver, or worked in the kitchen, if you worked within the tech industry and you are witnessing discrimination, any sort of injustice, human rights abuses, here's the information that you should consider if you are thinking about going public. And that part of it, here's the information you should have, make the decision that's right for you, is guiding piece for me for my work, because I don't believe in martyrdom, and I don't believe that people should feel forced into speaking up because it's not the right decision for everyone. Like I mentioned, if I had a kid at the time, I absolutely would not have spoken up because my kid's access to healthcare would have been tied to my employment. And that wouldn't have been a fair decision for me to make for her. And so I think everyone wants to do better, or many people, some people maybe even, want to do better, want to help, but folks really need to think about what it means if you are not able to keep a roof over your head, if you're not able to have access to healthcare, and whether it's actually helpful to others for you to put yourself in a more vulnerable position by speaking up.
Yeah, so if somebody in this room is actively in a position where they are contemplating, hey, I have an opportunity to speak up, but I have a lot of decisions to make, this handbook could be a good resource for them to go to not only think about what they need to consider, but if they choose to move forward, some of the steps they need to take.
Yeah, and things that are absolute possibilities. Like before I even was pushed out of Pinterest, I was doxxed by someone, a white supremacist who was working at the company. I wrote in an internal, I used to work on a number of trust and safety issues at the company. Most people would be surprised to think that trust and safety is a big thing on Pinterest, but it is, as on any other platform. And I think I wrote internally that Ben Shapiro is a white supremacist, which he is. I stand by. This other person who's working at the company, who was one as well, did not like that, doxed me, and I was getting death threats, was getting rape threats. My face was all over their parts of the internet, and a TV personality who was at Fox at the time also spoke about it. So there are so many potential repercussions for speaking up that I don't think it's responsible, even as someone who's done it, to encourage others to without really considering what that looks like for your life and who around you might be putting in danger as well.
Really sound advice, especially coming from someone who has gone through this, but also another question I have for you is, it's been 5 years, right? About 5 years?
Yeah.
What has life been like? And are you being impacted in any way, favorably or unfavorably now, to this day?
Yeah, I mean, if you had asked me this question at the end of last year, I would have said, it's been fine. It's interesting to be known for one of the worst moments of your life, and that to be a topic of discussion. That was the hardship, if there is one. But then at the beginning of this year, I actually had a direct experience of retaliation from someone who is still at Pinterest. I'd gotten a job offer. I decided after having my daughter, spending time with her, to go back and try to work at a company. I got an offer at a law firm, signed my contract, was working on start dates, and then a lawyer connected to Pinterest at the firm intervened and had my offer revoked. So that's the reality of living in this time in the United States, when my recourse would be to what? Sue? When we don't have a functioning EEOC, our Employment or Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Like that, right now in the United States, what folks are faced with is you can have the law on your side and there's no one to appeal to. You could take it all the way to the Supreme Court and you're met with a bench that has decided that no laws exist for the administration. So that's what we're facing. I wish I had something happier to share, but honestly, the reality is that things from the time that I've spoken up have gotten worse. especially in the US. And so I feel really grateful, actually, that we have this space to discuss these issues where we can do it. Because, I mean, if we were having this in the US and you were live streaming it, I'm sure the live streaming provider would be getting a notice.
Cutting it, yeah, pulling the line, right?
Yeah.
Let's pivot a bit, because let's talk about some of the learnings you've had from this experience and, with Pinterest. And some of the things that you and I have talked about is just this analysis paralysis and a pet peeve of a big frustration you have where people get stuck and there's no action taking place. Where does this frustration come from? I'm imagining that you faced it when you were going through this journey with Pinterest, but maybe you were facing it before, but where does this frustration come from? And then what are ways that we can shift this mindset when we recognize that we're in it? Do you have suggestions for how we can kind of get out of that mindset?
I think the analysis paralysis comes from a good place, where, especially in activist circles, we want to talk to everyone. We want to get consensus on an issue before moving forward, before taking action. But what upsets me about that is, while we're having conferences, honestly, while we are talking about the issues, people are facing harms every single day. And so for me, it's important, even if something fails, like the bill in California could have failed, in other states it did fail. It's important when we have a moment, when we have an opportunity, to take it. And so whether that's in big ways with a law, smaller ways, like locally in Santa Fe, myself and a group of other moms got together and we just launched a political action committee. We were like, what the president is doing is screwing us for sure. We cannot impact that. What we can impact is who is our mayor, who's on our city council. And so I think there are so many ways, big and small, for us to find ways to act now, not next year, not in 6 months, not when some big idea comes across us and we think, oh, this is what will really move the needle. Like, even speaking up at work, organizing is something that I think is really important in workplaces where you're able to, and places where you're not physically put in harm's way by doing so.
So it's interesting. You just mentioned that these moms came together and said, hey, let's do something. Do you think that there's a big part of why you can take action so swiftly because you're already among a community of doers that are already engaged? Or do you think that you spark the movement in others? Like, how does this work? If someone is looking at, I want to take action, do they need to look at the company they're keeping? Or do they need?
I think so, but I think there's so many folks who want to do more, but just aren't sure how. Yesterday, New Mexico time, so I guess this morning, the group of moms that I'm working with, we call ourselves Niños and Neighbors for our PAC, worked with a number of other community groups to put together a forum we have an upcoming mayor's race, and ask questions about how the candidates are going to improve the lives of families in our town. Like, it's not, I don't think at least it's that hard to ask folks who want to be in a position of power how they're going to serve the people who they're supposedly representing. And so I don't think anything that I'm doing is particularly special, but it's my way of trying to do something while Rome is burning.
Yeah. How do you maintain balance? I mean, think that you see something that triggers a need action. How do you decide what to go after and what to let be?
I know my skill set, and it's not, I mean, I'm on here on a stage, but I'm not really a fan of public speaking, so that's not That's not my thing. Marketing isn't my thing. So finding the folks who are good at that is what I feel like is my way of balance. And then also, you mentioned all my animals. Like, I have time for everything, because if I weren't here, I think like about this time, yeah, about like 9 a.m., I'm feeding the goats and the chickens and my dogs. So balance is forced on me by taking care of other animals and a human being.
Okay, so here's another question. This comes up quite a bit in tech. Regulation hinders innovation. Do you agree?
I reject the premise of that, because without regulation, I wouldn't have felt comfortable getting on 3 planes to come here. And so regulation is very important for innovation, and we've accepted it in industries where we feel like our safety is at risk. And I just don't know how many more examples we need of violence being organized and perpetrated by these platforms, on these platforms, and by this industry before we can accept that, no, there are actual harms. And if safety and regulation are together for automobiles, for planes, for the food that we eat, for the air that we breathe, then why would it be any different for this industry?
Yeah, and it makes me makes me think about the work that you're doing with shareholders, and some of us would say it's surprising sometimes, to think about shareholders being allies, but of course I wouldn't call it that word. There's an alliance of some sort. But I wonder, where were you surprised by organizations that were supportive for the work that you were doing, especially with Silence No More Act? And where were you surprised when you expected this support, but it wasn't there?
I think in this room especially, a number of us probably have worked for nonprofits, and there's a funny thing that takes place within the industry, because it's an industry just like any other, where it's rules and activism for thee, but not for me. And that was one thing that I found particularly shocking. One of the organizations, and I won't name them because I think they do good work, but lawyers within nonprofits are, especially employment lawyers, are not that much different from the employment lawyers that work in corporations. But they're funding my work, they're excited about my work, and I ask them, okay, so what about your employment agreements? Crickets. like, are you willing to actually change the way that you engage with your employees? Because it's all well and good for you to fund my work, for you to be excited about press releases about this law, but what about your employees in other places? So in California, you now have to do this, but what about the folks that you work with all across the world? How about them? Yeah.
Interesting. And for those that were supportive that you weren't anticipating, what was unique about those? How did you find those? Was it going out to?
It really, the group that was the most surprising really were the shareholder groups. And for them, it was less surprising. It was surprising that they understood the financial argument so quickly and so easily. But I do think that activists who have done shareholder work as part of the environmental movement for decades really set the stage for that. And then also folks who worked on LGBT issues within companies and pushing shareholders to force companies to act differently laid the groundwork. But again, for both of those, we're seeing like insane regression. This administration, they started their work, of course, 8 years ago. But even in the last 8 months, they've done so much to scare, in the United States, I mean, companies and shareholders and anyone else who would like to move forward into not acting and in many ways regressing on policies. So it's not a great time.
Yeah, yeah. So one question for all of us that, of us that are org leaders or members of organizations here today, what would you invite us to do to surface and address the limits of our org values in practice? So you were saying that how do you stay aligned with what your principles are? What would you advise us to do to kind of look at that a little bit closer?
I don't think it's that hard. If you're going public and saying these are issues we care about, then you shouldn't be punishing employees for also raising those issues within the workplace. If you believe in freedom, it needs to start where you have power and influence and the ability to change things. And so I really don't think it's that difficult, but I do think that companies or organizations, nonprofits, twist themselves into pretzels trying to figure out how they can do great work externally, but not even asking, like, what's going on here? Are our employees happy? Or is it okay for them to sign these agreements and for them to be burnt out because we're the good guys?
Yeah. It's a good question to ask, especially when it's in practice and you're faced with some specific calls to action that makes you reflect. Question for the audience. Sorry again for those online, but how many of you use a Google or Meta product? Okay, most of all of us. Is anyone not using a Google product like YouTube or Google Search? Anyone not using Google at all? 1, 2 people, 3, almost half, almost getting there, trying. Okay, is anyone not using any Meta products like Facebook or what's okay, more people, about 5 to 7 people. Okay, wow, okay. I was expecting even less than that, but. So it's clearly difficult to move away from these big tech companies. And I'm wondering if you think that if we moved away from the Google and Meta, and go to more decentralized platforms like Mastodon and Blue Sky and Black Sky, or nonprofits like Signal, is it a viable solution? Is it a path? Is it a good approach?
I think it's a good approach, sure, but also, and this may be controversial to say, along with my belief that no one needs to be a martyr, I don't think that change happens, honestly, at the individual level. Just like I don't believe that using paper straws is going to have any impact when billionaires can still own private planes on the environment at large. So I think, honestly, if someone prefers using Mastodon or Blue Sky or whatever, go for it. But I would never want to shame people for using the platforms that are the most ubiquitous, that allow us to connect with our family and our friends and to reach people, because the issue isn't our individual use. The issue is these POS executives who could do things differently and choose not to because they care more about money than people.
So we have other forms of technoviolence. We've talked about surveillance technologies, algorithmic discrimination, platform policies that are harmful to communities globally. And you've argued that the American ethos of individual mobility is a myth, and it's urgent we take collective action. What specific actions do you think are most important for us to take right now?
Oh my goodness. Speaking up when people have the ability to. Again, I'm so grateful for this conference and this space, because it's something that has like when I think, okay, could a university host this right now? Maybe, and also lose public funding. Could a nonprofit host this right now in the US? Maybe, but also the Ford Foundation and others were recently called out and accused of funding the violence that resulted in, I'm not even going to name him, honestly, because then I may not be able to enter back in the US being assassinated. Like that is how insane things are right now. And so I think, yes, action is really important, but just having the ability to talk about what's going on is very quickly not an option, like becoming not an option for those of us who have no choice but to live in the States.
And one question, I know we're getting ready to transition to questions. So I think part of this work is so exhausting, I would imagine. Yeah. Maybe it's fueling, but I would say it's exhausting and draining. How do you stay grounded in it? I'm imagining it's the animals.
The animals help. They help a lot. Living in New Mexico is pretty awesome. But yeah, no, it is exhausting, and it also feels, I was talking to friends who also lobby and work directly on policy, and it's Sisyphean at this point, but yeah, it has gotten so difficult to feel like even massive change in a state like California is moving the needle when the president of the country is labeling people enemies of the state for doing this kind of work. It just, yeah, it's rough right now.
So I have hope. I have hope, and because I believe in us. I believe in us humans, and right now we're going through a very rough time. But what gives you hope? What are you sitting in that keeps you doing this work, hopeful, and moving forward?
My knee-jerk, sort of sarcastic answer is that after Rome collapsed and the empire collapsed, they rebuilt something, and it's a nice destination spot. So eventually, if everything doesn't burn down at once, maybe it'll be okay to visit the US eventually, but yeah, honestly, I don't know. I read too much. Like, I know too much history to feel like optimism is gonna get us on the right track. Like, honestly, I think we are effed. And so my hope is that here in Europe, and in other places outside of where we're totally screwed, folks see what's happening and understand that you can have a functioning constitutional democracy 1 year, and then a few months later, you cannot have that. So you can't assume that things are just going to keep working because they have.
Yeah. I was thinking that you would say something related to your daughter, but I guess that's...
Oh, I love her, and so my goal for her is to find a way for her not to be stuck in the U.S. Yeah, that really is where things are. And just practically, yeah, it's bad. It's real bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if anyone met Arinma, but she's amazing.
She's cute.
Okay, I think we're at a point where we are ready to take questions. So I think we have a couple of mics, and we already have one hand over here. And
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your talk. It's very interesting to see someone who's so engaged in whistleblowing and in all these activities. I have a question concerning one aspect of this process, which is, to my knowledge, in the US, you can be rewarded as a whistleblower, and you get a percentage somewhere between 10 and 30% of the sanctions that are probably based on your information implemented. Germany, or the EU in general, says that is the wrong way to go. Do you have any thoughts on that, based on your experience? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I'm just going to say it back to make sure I understand it. Whether, so the United States has a program, it's specific to the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, that rewards people for whistleblowing when damages are collected from the company. That's if the SEC goes after the company for damages, if they're collected, if it relates to securities, then yes, there's a reward. And there are a number of people who have received large rewards. Everything in the US is driven by money, and so just culturally, I understand why that system isn't in place. But also, one of the issues that I have with that program is you need a functioning SEC. We have an SEC right now that is not going to pursue any sort of whistleblowing unless it's aligned with the administration. So there's a flaw in the function of tying it to that agency. But then also, often in these cases, if you know any of these cases where people have been rewarded for whistleblowing, you have to be in a pretty privileged position within an organization to have non-public information that the company should have shared with the SEC in order to even whistleblow. And so it's not an equitable program in my mind to have it set up like that. But with that being the system that is, I do think it's helpful to have some sort of incentive for executives or others who have access to information to share that. So there are benefits and drawbacks, but I don't think it's an issue that it's a program that's not popular globally, because there are lots of issues with it. Yeah.
Right here.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. My question is around how to deal when the law is technically on your side, but the state isn't. And I'd like to leverage also a German example in this. Last year we had a conference like this planned for Palestinian efforts, and that was not allowed to go, not like this. That was shut down, and a bunch of German police came in and shut the whole thing down. So they're clearly constantly behaving in illegal ways. So my question to you is, from your thoughts and maybe experience, how do you deal with going about resisting when you're faced with lawlessness from your own state and your own systems that are supposed to protect you?
Oh, how do you deal with when the law is on your side and still the state decides to come after you? It is frightening, and that is exactly what is happening right now in the US, whether it's on Gaza or anything else. I mean, our Secretary of State floated, probably seriously, combing through citizens' social media to revoke our passports. So, okay. So you understand like what the stakes are. I don't have an answer. Like, I'm not afraid to say I don't have an answer. I don't know what you do when you can be put in prison, taken off the air, lose your job, and the law is on your side. Who do you appeal to? Part of the reason I think fascist and authoritarian regimes go after institutions like universities and law firms, like has happened in the US, is that you ensure that anyone that people would go to for help has already been silenced. And so at that point, I guess we have each other. If we're all in the gulag, then at least we're there together. But I don't know. It's bad.
I don't have anything to add.
You were working for mostly consumer tech companies, consumer tech products. And when you think about whistleblowing within the tech sectors that are by their design already more involved in more gruesome things, so how do you see whistleblowing happening from companies like Anduril or other parts of that world?
Oh, man. So you say consumer tech, and then you mention Anduril and other Palantir, I'm sure, is on that list as well. They're all connected. They really are all connected because you describe the companies I worked at as consumer tech, but they're all surveillance companies. Palantir can't function without the data that's being sucked up by the likes of Meta and Google. And so first and foremost, I believe that Google and Meta are surveillance companies. What they're doing is ensuring that they have all of the information and then can use it and sell it for whatever they want, which is why it's not surprising that they found an alliance with an administration that wants to use their technology for the military specifically. And so, yeah, I mean, I think they have what people would consider fun products, but at the end of the day, they really are one and the same. And Palmer Luckey, who I think is Anduril, started with Meta, so.
We have one other question here.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for this amazing round. So you mentioned a couple of things about how things change so fast in the US, you couldn't imagine it, right? One day to the next. So I'm Canadian, and we see this happening in the States, and we're starting to think, holy shit, this can happen tomorrow in the States, in Canada. Hasn't, but it's creeping into Canada. So there's a lot of pressure from those things going on in the States, in Canada as well. What I'm wondering in your work and in your networks, are you looking to create partnerships, maybe potentially strengthening relationships with people and organizations in Canada, to help the work that you guys are doing in the US, but also to help prevent what's happening in the States creeping further into Canada. So just the kind of relations you might be having or could have with Canadian organizations.
Absolutely. I worked with an individual.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, yes. So what kinds of connections are being made with organizations in Canada to try to prevent what's going on in the States from taking place in Canada as well? And the answer is yes. I individually, and then organizations that I've worked with on NDAs specifically, have talked about ways to introduce similar laws in provinces in Canada and at the national level. But then more generally, the nonprofits that I work with are trying and engaging with organizations in Canada, but I think, I mean, you get it, you see it, but I do think that there is a lot of disbelief that what is happening and what has happened in the United States could or would happen somewhere else because, oh, we're just crazy, we're uneducated, we're whatever descriptor people want to use for what's happening in the US. Like, we're just, folks are at a loss internally and externally. And so, I think that it is hard to get people to move with the urgency that's necessary when you're not facing the issue directly, but the tariff situation, I think, was hopefully a push in the direction of understanding at least that Canada is not immune to the crazy things that are happening down south, and so you need your own protections in place, because they're, the Christo-fascists that run our government are sending satellites all over. They have folks, and they are trying to ensure that it's not just the United States, but it's the world order that we all eventually have to live under.
We have a question online. Christine, yes. Can you read the question?
Thank you. This question is for Ifeoma. Thank you for sharing your story and for your bravery in breaking silence. I'm curious about what happens next when organizations try to silence people again after they've already spoken out. From your perspective, how do you see that cycle playing out?
Yeah, how do you see the cycle of organizations silencing people after they've spoken out already? I shared the example. It's a great question, and thank you for it. Whoever asked it online, I shared my experience from earlier this year. Even when you're not at a place, haven't been at a place for 5 years, as a result of my work, Pinterest released myself and all other employees who had ever signed these agreements from the agreements. The retaliation you have no recourse for. And so I think that especially in a time like now, when a lot of folks and organizations feel emboldened to go after people, we're going to see more examples of this. There was a stat recently that over the last 6 months, something like 300,000 Black women in the United States have been forced out of work. Who knows where the numbers are on how much of that is retaliation, how much of that is from the federal government, and the federal government specifically cutting the agencies where they know Black women work the most. But the other side of that stat that I thought was really fascinating was almost the same number of white men have been added to the workforce in the US, which, I mean, I don't know exactly what's happening there, but I don't think it's too hard to guess.
We had one more question. Oh.
One more question. For Tammarrian. What does systemic change in the tech industry look like to you, and where do you think it needs to begin? Policy, company culture, leadership, or something else?
Oh, that's a great question. I think this is not going to sound like the pragmatic approach that we've been talking about, but I think that in order for us to have any type of change that is lasting and in the direction that we want to go, it has to do with a lot of self-work. Because we are looking at each other, and there are parts of ourselves we don't like, and so then when we cannot embrace that and actually be with ourselves, with those parts of us that we don't like, whatever resembles that outside of ourselves, we hate. We want to do away with, we want to get rid of, we want to gut, we want to destroy. And if we can't resolve that within ourselves, we just won't be able to bring a lot more harmony into our workplaces and remove the fears of having so much difference around us. And so it is, even if we had the numbers, there's like a hole at the bottom of the bucket where people come in and they're like, okay, we've reached equilibrium, but it's a toxic environment and people just keep draining out. And so until people are able to really look at themselves and there's a shift, a collective shift in how we think and how we treat ourselves and how that mirrors with how we treat each other, then I think it's extremely difficult for us to have a systemic change.
I'm glad Tatiana brought us together, because I'm not a Zen, and I need more of this in my life.
I will offer that to you, and I need a little bit more action. So here we are. We are bonding right now. Good question. Thank you for that question. There was another question here.
I wanted to continue on the theme of system change, because I think Ifeoma talked a couple of times about not asking people to be martyrs, right? Like, it is scary to be without a job, to be without healthcare, to be without a house. And I think the only way out is collective action. But I have lived and worked in Silicon Valley before, and I really don't see it happening there, because these are some of the highest paid people in the whole world. So yeah, I don't know. I'm also cynical, but I'm curious if you have examples maybe of tech workers actually organizing and taking on the big companies.
Yeah, I love this question of like tech workers coming together to organize, because it allows me to shift the premise of the term tech worker. One of the things that I addressed in the Tech Workers Handbook was when we were writing it and putting it online, that it was for everyone. So whether you're janitorial, whether you're a bus driver, and we do see organizing happening with the folks, funny enough, who are lower paid. They are not the ones considered tech workers, but are still working within the industry. Content moderators have organized not just in the US, but in Kenya and another number of other countries where they are the lowest paid individuals doing the worst work. We're seeing with AI and the amount of money that's being poured into it, more organizing with the folks who are doing labeling primarily outside of the US. So I think there are examples of it, and those of us who have worked in the tech industry and have been considered tech workers, the way the term is traditionally used, have to see ourselves as in the same struggle as the folks who are labeling in Estonia, in Southeast Asia, in Kenya, wherever else, because our struggles really are the same. Like, at the end of the day, even if you're an engineer who is making $10 million, $15 million a year, which it really is a small number of people, you're still not protected the way that an executive is at these companies. And so we're more alike than we are different. And at the end of the day, if you're a worker, you're disposable. And that's what we've seen at every level within the industry, that people are treated as disposable.
Can I do a quick follow-up?
Yes.
I think Tammarrian talked about Earthseed in the introduction, and I'm guessing you're an Octavia Butler fan.
I am a huge fan.
I was very curious what that is all about, because you didn't talk about that.
Yeah, so Earthseed was just the name of the company that I started in order to do this work. And the reason why I'm a huge Octavia E. Butler fan, and her whole, as part of the parable books, the religion, if you want to call it that in the books, is that God is change. That the only thing constant is change, and that really is something that is important to me, because that's what I believe as well. That, like, if there is a God, the only God that exists is the fact that things will change. And so if we want to be part of that change, then we should be. Things are going to change no matter what. They can change for the worse. We can play our own little part in changing them for the better in our individual lives or collectively, as we've been discussing.
Did you already say what you do with Earthseed?
Oh yeah, all of this work. So the Silence No More Act, the Tech Worker Handbook,
all
of this work falls under Earthseed. Yeah. Me being at this conference falls under Earthseed, yeah.
Tatiana.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Now we are going into the very beautiful discussion, but I'm bringing it back also in the terrible reality we are living in, because I have a curiosity, also something, you know, we have been sharing a bit once, then, you know, I decide then to invite you, and my curiosity would be, if we speak about ICE and what is happening now in US, we also see that is a business as well, because the state is profiting on the presence of people in prison or in detention centers, and is a real estate business.
Yep.
And so now we've been speaking about the business of technology, but I think things are, as you also say, are very interconnected, and so this oppression towards minorities also happening as a business through the carceral state. And I wanted to ask you if you want to say something about that.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to say something about the business of oppression, because it's, I mean, it's always been a business. When you think about the founding of the United States being genocide and slavery, it was always a business. There's always been a business relationship in oppressing people, and so it's no surprise that the largest business that runs private prisons, their earnings call was a celebration about what is happening right now, and the fact that business has never been better for private prisons in the United States at every single level, whether it's the Anderills, the Palantirs, these physical spaces where they are housing people, because their housing isn't even the right term for what they're doing in brutalizing people. Someone is making money. At every single point, someone is making money, and it's sick. It's sick and it's scary. And also, it is tied into the fabric of the country, because regular people who may not agree with what is happening, oftentimes their pensions and their retirement is also tied into the profits that these companies are making. And so, in so many ways, the phrase that there's no conscious consumption under capitalism has not been, could not be more true in the United States. Yeah, oh my goodness. This reminded me, actually, perfect question. Before coming here, I flew here with my daughter. Before coming here, I went and paid for a global entry for her, so that hopefully when we return in a few days, there is less of a chance that I get stopped for questioning, because we won't go through the regular line. We've now paid to go through the expedited line, so that hopefully some TSA, DHS, whatever agency officer doesn't Google my name and then see this and start asking questions about what I was doing in Germany and why I was here and what I was saying, and maybe pull up a video. So yeah, that's the reality, and I have immense privilege to be able to do that, immense privilege to be able to be here and talk about this. But yeah, those are the practical realities. So while packing, I'm also thinking about what happens if I get questions. How should I put my daughter's hair in pigtails, so that hopefully if we do get stopped, then they focus on how cute she is instead of what kind of radical her mom is.
They're going to be distracted by that anyway.
Hopefully.
Other questions? All right, so I had a question for you. This is strictly about the USA versus non-USA. The way that you have done activism in the US, do you think that it's applicable, that we could do the same type of approach here in Europe or elsewhere in the world?
Absolutely, and I hate also that like this has been such a U.S. focus. That's where I'm from. That's what I know. The U.S. is not the center of the world and shouldn't be, but in so many ways, the evil that is taking place in our country impacts others. And so I hope also that some of the ways in which activists and organizations have been successful in changing the law is a model that can be used in countries where the law is still respected.
Yes, I think that there's a bit of an interesting sort of reality check with that, right? I thought I saw another hand, but I want to make sure. Okay, no, I don't. Okay, I have another question for you. Based on tech educators, I've talked to a few tech educators that knew that we were going to be talking and really wanted to know, because they are doing tech education for people who are young and of members of marginalized communities, or that are transitioning into tech, as a second or third career. And they look at your story and they say, how do I keep these folks motivated? Because tech needs us desperately. So what would you say to keep these students that are going through this training to get into tech, what would you say to keep them motivated or keep them coming into the field?
My approach and my view is that the industry, and this connects to the regulation question that we talked about earlier, is not special. Okay, so the tech industry, if it's a job, a job you get, go, do it well. If there are ways that you can impact the industry, your coworkers more positively, do it. But I would hope you would do the same if you were working in another industry. People are still working in the oil industry. People work in all sorts of industries that are harming us in one way or another, but are also essential to life. And so my view is not opt out. Definitely don't opt out of employment if you can get a job. But understand that it's not special and the harms are real.
We are out of time, even though there was one question that popped up.
Catch me later. Yeah.
Ifeoma, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of your experiences and learnings and your calls to actions. And Tatiana, and thank you, everyone.
So I also want really to thank you, also Ifeoma, thank you for the great courage that you had by blowing the whistle, and also for coming here, because now we are in the reality we saw is also an act of courage to come to a conference like this. So thank you, and also thank you, Tammarrian, for the great moderation. It was really a pleasure to have both of you here. And I want to tell the audience we do now half an hour break, and then we will be back with the book presentation, Platform Brutality, and then with the panel Dismantling the Algorithmic Gates. So see you later, and thank you again.
Yeah.